Welcome back to Athens Happens. I'm Ayden McDougle, digital content producer for The New Political.
And I'm Taylor Schneider, digital content creator for The New Political.
Athens Happens is a podcast brought to you by The New Political, a student publication dedicated to explaining the nuances of Ohio University, Athens, and state politics.
You can find new episodes at thenewpolitical.com or wherever else podcasts can be downloaded.
So, if you haven't noticed, I am joined by a new voice. Not necessarily new because she's been on the podcast before, but Taylor, you're now co-hosting with me. And if you could introduce yourself to people who aren't fully aware.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Taylor Schneider. I grew up in Wapakoneta, Ohio, and then I moved to Cleveland, Tennessee, which is where I went to high school. And now I find myself in Athens, Ohio, which is the best place to be in the world, in my opinion. I'm studying communication studies with a minor in political science, and I am working on a certificate in law, justice, and culture. It is my senior year, so I'm spending most of my time working on my thesis, which is going to be interviewing wrongfully convicted people about their experiences post-exoneration. Some things I enjoy doing outside of the academic sphere are dancing, writing, singing, hanging out with my friends.
Well, I'm glad to have you co-hosting with me this year.
Me too.
And I'm excited for what we're going to talk about. Well, last night was the presidential debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris.
It sure was.
The first one we've seen with both of them on stage together. The first time I think they've ever met each other, which was interesting.
I know, when they said that, I was like, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
General thoughts, comments, concerns about the debate, what you thought, and all that.
It went better than I expected it to go. I watched it outside of Baker Theater at our university center with Ayden, our friend Riley, and some other people from The New Political. And surprisingly, there was a great turnout, not just of people from The New Political, but other students on campus that were interested in, civic engagement. So that was really, really awesome to see and really cool to be a part of. At times, the whole room would kind of erupt in laughter, which, yes, it's funny at the time, but also a bit unsettling because I feel like presidential debates should be something that are very serious, not something that we're laughing at like it's kind of reality TV. But it was hard not to laugh at certain points. I totally understand. But I think my favorite, let's both give our favorite quotes from the debate. I mean, I can't get over the fact that we're executing babies, apparently. That was crazy. What about you?
Well, I mean, other than the fact that is a false statement, but the other false statement that I really enjoyed was in Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. Again, false statement, by the way, but that was one of my favorite little moments.
Ohio got their shining moment.
I know, two shout outs for Ohio. Springfield, Ohio, all the things that they're doing there that aren't happening there, I guess.
What was the other one?
For us passing our issue 1 last year, having abortion rights being
I must have missed that.
Trump's big thing was that it went back to the states, which is what a lot of people were looking forward to and kind of wanted. But the result of that being Ohio voting to keep abortion rights and Trump saying that certain states like Ohio were more liberal and than what he would have expected or wanted.
Right. Something that was probably expected but still frustrated me as I watched is I felt neither of them were answering the questions. Literally at any given point, I had the question that was asked in the back of my brain, and they were not even touching on the basis of it. They would talk about their history or attacking each other or talking about literally a completely different issue. And that's hard because these people that are watching it, we're actually interested in what they have to say about these controversial issues like abortion and immigration and the economy. Why are we talking about your personal beef with each other? Set it aside. Tell us what you're going to do for us, because that's ultimately what the debate is supposed to be for, is to educate all of us. But it just felt like that wasn't what happened. And so it was frustrating to watch that I knew the question that was being asked, and it just felt like we were just straying farther and farther away from it on both sides,
Yeah, I mean, even with the history of televised debates starting in 1960 with Nixon and Kennedy then all the way until today, there was that sense of civility between candidates for a long time, and then we have shifted away from that. But there is that part of debates that have always existed with politicians is that they just don't answer questions. And it was I mean, yeah, it's annoying and it sucks. And as like American voters who want to know what these candidates truly think, it's something that we have seen for years of just dodging questions and answering it the way that they want to. And we'll jump into another topic, like, you know, hit on it in the first couple words and then jump to something totally different, which is what we saw a lot of. We've seen it in the past. And with last night, I think it just got more amplified because of how tensions are still kind of at like a high point in politics, to where it's like, yeah, we can keep it civil, we can keep the attacks kind of a little bit lower, but we just really wanted to know what they thought. So I agree with you on that. Yeah. My biggest takeaway from the debate itself was something that I kind of figured out later, because in the moment of watching it, I was like, this is whatever, insane, and I took my notes down the way that I do because I'm obsessed with things like that. Kind of at the end, I was like, yeah, there's a winner here. But one thing that I heard someone bring up before that I didn't think in the moment, but kind of looking into more once fact checks came out of like, oh yeah, that statement was false, that statement was true, misleading, needs more context, however wants to be phrased. But once all that fact checking came out of what both candidates said, I heard someone say that for this debate, compared to the last one between Trump and Biden, you look at the one with Trump and Biden, Biden definitely lost that debate, but you wouldn't really necessarily say Trump won that debate. Right. But with this one, watching it and like the aftermath of it, I tend to agree with the fact that, or the idea that Harris won this debate and Trump lost this debate.
I agree.
It wasn't a, oh, well, you know, a little bit better than, it was like, no, this side was clearly worse than this one, and this side was clearly better than the other one.
I agree. What do you think the detriment of both sides were, aside from, you know, not answering the questions, which was to be expected?
I think the biggest detriment, the biggest detriment, I think it's Trump lost some people, could have, might not have, but the way that it felt like is he lost some middle class women voters, while Harris didn't really gain any.
I agree. She definitely could have capitalized on that more. I think she was focusing in other spaces rather than the voting, like the voters that she needs to turn and can turn. It felt like she was more appealing to the people that she already has the votes of. When,
you know, first time on stage, 56 days, 55 now, till Election Day. But
with that being said, it is important more now than ever to register to vote. If you are a student on Ohio University's campus, you're always able to change your address to be able to vote here in Athens County. If that's not something that you want to do, go ahead and send in an absentee ballot to your hometown. It's important that your voice is heard no matter where you're living and where you're at. Ayden, where can people register to vote?
Yeah, I mean, to register to vote or any questions about voting, you can go to just vote.gov, vote.gov.
They made it easy?
Yeah, everything's there for registering to vote, changing your address, voting as a college student, voting as a new U.S. citizen. Everything is there for if you are wanting to vote or participate in this upcoming election. With that being said, though, this upcoming election for Ohio in particular, there will be an issue on the ballot known as Issue 1, which will be proposing a new amendment to end gerrymandering and restructure how Ohio's districts are redrawn on their map for upcoming elections and whatnot. That is led by citizens and not politicians.
As far as I'm educated, they needed 1,000 signatures to get it on the ballot, and they got 530 times 1,000.
530,000.
That means that this ballot has a chance of getting passed. Mm-hmm. This is something that Ohioans actually do care about. And it might seem boring because it's like, you know, why do we care about drawing lines? But gerrymandering is something that the state of Ohio has struggled with for years. I mean, when we first started drawing lines, things were going pretty smoothly until, how do I put them down? So this isn't a new issue. Things were pretty chill until 1878, and that's when the power shifted between Democrats and Republicans. And from 1878 and the 12 years following that, the lines started to be redrawn 6 separate times. So that's kind of what kicked off the Ohio being a bit indecisive about where we're drawing our lines, which counties are going in certain districts and things like that. And that, you know, leads us to today. A lot of things happen in between, obviously, where the lines that are drawn currently have been declared unconstitutional by our own Supreme Court.
Yeah, the way that World Population Review puts it for Ohio in itself is that, I mean, even though the total number of votes cast for a major party is consistently close in Ohio, it's kind of shifted a little bit more. Yes, Ohio has become a little bit more of a red-leaning state. It's not up there with all those swing states anymore. But the gerrymandering technique known as packing or cracking enabled the party that drew the maps to win 75% of the seats. So 12 of 16 in 2016, despite earning only 50 to 60% of the vote.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, as we know and have stated, Ohio is one of those gerrymandered states. Along with Ohio being one of the most gerrymandered states, it also includes 10 others, which would be Arkansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Texas, Utah, West Virginia, and Wisconsin. So, and out of the total of 11, there's only one state that leans left or leans Democratic, and that being Maryland.
Wait, is it that the state leans left, or is it that the gerrymandered lines favor the Democratic Party only in Maryland?
The gerrymandered lines or the gerrymandered districts favor the Democratic Party, or are drawn to favor the Democratic Party.
But like you said, the other 10 on that list of most gerrymandered states are favoring the Republican Party, including Ohio's.
Yep. I mean, Michigan was one of the states that was also heavily gerrymandered, but Voters Not Politicians introduced this into Michigan. The way that they structured it and start explaining is that they break it down with introducing a quote from the state of Michigan Constitution in 1963, which begins with the following words, quote, "all political powers inherent in the people." And then Voters Not Politicians envisioned a truly representative democracy where the will of the voters drives government decision-making and public policy. They are a nonpartisan advocacy organization that works to strengthen democracy by engaging people across Michigan in effective citizen action. So in 2017, they launched an anti-gerrymandering campaign to create fair, impartial, and transparent redistricting process for Michigan. On November 6th of 2018, Proposal 2 was what they had it titled, passed with 61% of the vote and created an independent citizens redistricting commission. So kind of along the same lines that Ohio is trying to do now with Issue 1 and Citizens Not Politicians, trying to create that independent citizen-led redistricting commission, because as it stands for the state of Ohio, the redistricting commission consists of 7 people, like it has been mentioned before on this podcast, where it includes the governor, the auditor, secretary of state, speaker of the House appointee, House minority appointee, Senate majority, and Senate minority appointee. So that makes a total of 7 members. But the way that it breaks down politically is 5 Republicans, 2 Democrats. So it is a very heavily partisan commission.
And another important thing is that every time Ayden said appointee, those people appointed themselves.
Yeah, every appointee that they could have chosen anyone, they did in fact choose themselves. But the new proposal with Issue 1 and Citizens Not Politicians is to create a 15-member independent redistricting commission, and that would be 5 Republican citizens, 5 Democrat citizens, and 5 independent citizens. That would be the commission that decides, draws out the district maps for the state of Ohio, preferably making it less gerrymandered than it is already.
Right. And the way those members are chosen is by a screening panel of 4 retired judges. 2 of them will affiliate with the Republican Party, and the other 2 will affiliate with the Democratic Party. So that's their bipartisan way of splitting up the screening process of these 15 people who will be on the committee. Could we talk a little bit more about how somebody can qualify for being on this committee aside from their political party? Because I think that I think that it's interesting because there's a lot of different criteria, and I'm not sure exactly how I feel about all the criteria. There's too much to sit here and list out, but I can kind of list off some of the important ones. So the following people are ineligible to serve on the commission if you're a current elected or appointed official, or an immediate family member of one of those officials. If you've served in any federal, state, or local elective or appointed office in Ohio, if you've been a candidate for any federal, state, or local elective office, or an immediate family member of a candidate. And lastly, this one's the most interesting to me, people who have served as an officer, paid consultant, or contractor to any political party, political action committee, or campaign committee at the federal, state, or local level. So the way this is reading is almost as if, let's say, if Ayden or I tried to be on this committee, I don't think we could, because in the last 6 years, we have absolutely served as some type of campaign. We've helped on people's campaigns, right? Or openly affiliated with certain political action committees. So it almost feels like this makes a lot of people ineligible. And I'm not saying that I disagree with the amendment as a whole. I just think this is a really interesting section of it that might be overlooked. Yeah. Because then who can serve on this? People who don't have any political interest? People who aren't involved politically at all? Is that the idea? Is that we're keeping...
No, the way that I read it would be that I think you can have you can definitely have political affiliation, and I think you can be an Ohio citizen that has engaged in some form of politics, but not in the current or former politician, like being a political party official or being a lobbyist.
Okay, so they don't want you to be associated with a specific person within a political party.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, the way that because if you're having your committee made up of 15 people, they have to have some party affiliation, but not necessarily like a personal affiliation with like somebody who is a current former politician, lobbyist, whatever, for the party or a certain movement that leans a certain way. I think that's what they're trying to avoid, because that in theory would entirely keep it more of an independent process, which is what they're aiming to do, instead of having, the governor of the state be on this redistricting commission. So
it sounds like you don't think this criteria is too strict.
I think it's strict enough in a way that keeps it open to a very large majority of citizens who would either want to be engaged in that position, or maybe not even necessarily want to be engaged, but could, gives them that chance to represent their party and represent Ohio in a fair, unbiased, nonpartisan way.
I agree. I just worry about other people thinking that this is strict, specifically the voters who are on the fence of whether they're going to vote for this amendment or not. I feel like the criteria could be what turns them off of it, because the idea of it, nobody likes gerrymandering. Nobody likes the politicians having all the power, but this almost feels like the other extreme, where the politicians have absolutely no power. And these different criteria could be what flips somebody's yes vote to a no if they read it. But I don't know. That's just me predicting.
Personally, I don't like the politicians having that power in general, and something that could easily just be thrown to the citizens and should have been from the start. Yeah. Or been a commission that wasn't so heavily partisan in one way. Ending that gerrymandering is something that I am personally for. I've always been a big proponent of leaving the power to the people in the way that, in the way that constitutionally we are written as a nation or even as a state, giving people that power to make that decision, and the way that people have the power to keep their elected officials in check by voting by keeping them in office, or when election time comes, getting them out of office. And I think this is a step in a citizen-led direction, to where it's keeping any and all politician pretty much out of it, any and all lobbyist out of it, and leaving it to the people to choose. I feel like there'll be some government oversight on the commission. I don't know if that's written in there directly, because I haven't read that. I haven't read that part exactly, but working as an open, independent, nonpartisan commission, having that equal distribution of political party or political affiliation, having all 15 people come together with their opinions is better than having seven where the majority leans one way heavily while the other two pretty much get no say. Yeah.
I mean, the other problem with the fact that the politicians are deciding where to draw the lines are the politicians benefit from where the lines are drawn. So if it's somebody who's running for office again, incumbents in Ohio are automatically more likely to win than anyone running against them, because a lot of times these people that are drawing the lines are drawing them in a way that benefits them and the politicians that they're friends with, or the politicians that they're in good cahoots with. So it just keeps all this like scheminess happening in Congress, and there's nothing that the people can do about it. Republican or Democrat citizens can do about it.
So gerrymandering in itself is really just a way to where politicians or lobbyists kind of manipulate voting districts to protect their own interests, Democrat or Republican, and guarantee their reelection. So as a result of gerrymandering, incumbents running for reelection almost never lose, but as phrased by citizens, not politicians, we let politicians choose their voters. While this amendment will go to ban lobbyists and politicians from the process and instead empower voters to choose their politicians. So with that, and like what I've mentioned before, is Ohio gerrymandering, or gerrymandering in itself, uses a handful of techniques. So one term used for gerrymandering would be packing, which is kind of drawing a line that encompasses a very specific area and leaving that district quite small in size, but has the potential to be high in population, of a population that might lean more left or right. So Ohio Congressional District 11 up in Cuyahoga County is pretty much half of the county itself, and that pretty much encompasses a lot of inner city Cleveland, most of like Cleveland metro area. Outside of Cleveland, it would stretch into District 7, like outside of the other half of Cuyahoga County is District 7, which includes all of Medina County, all of Wayne County, and then part of Holmes County. So that would be condensing all that into District 11 would be packing. But on the other hand, another one called cracking, which is kind of separating out a district into stretching over to one part, which would make the collective vote more Republican in this sense, would be between District 15 and District 10. So District 15 includes the southwest side of Franklin County, all of Madison County, part of Fayette, a weird chunk of Clark County, and a weird chunk of Miami County and Shelby County. So an example of cracking would kind of be splitting a district or splitting a county kind of in two parts, essentially, which is what is seen throughout. But a pretty decent example would be between District 10 and District 15 of the U.S. congressional districts for the state of Ohio. District 10 in itself includes all of Montgomery, all of Greene, and part of Clark. The example of cracking in this map would be a little stretch of District 10 that goes about halfway through Clark County and then comes back down. That encompasses the town of Springfield, Ohio. What that really does, or what that means, is that District 15 would be more of a red district because it cuts out Springfield and it cuts out inner city Columbus, really.
Right, it literally cuts Franklin County in half.
Yeah, it cuts Franklin County in half between District 15 and District 3. But for 15 would be more of a red district, and then with how District 10 is drawn, it encompasses Dayton, which would be a bluer city, and then Springfield, which is probably a bluer city now. So that would mean...
It's like District 10 is like the bone that they're throwing the Democrat.
Yeah, it'd be District 10 is a blue district because it holds Dayton and Springfield together, even though it kind of cuts out Springfield being in its own county of Clark County, which is separate from where Dayton is.
So what about Athens, where we're living right now? We're part of District 12, but looking on the map, it almost seems like we're definitely not supposed to be looped into District 12 geographic-wise, because we consider ourselves part of Southeast Ohio, right? All the businesses that are around. We have Southeast Ohio Legal Services, Southeast Ohio XYZ, that we are part of Southeast Ohio. But the problem is we're looped into District 12, which is clearly Central Ohio. In my opinion, it would make more sense for us to be looped in with, Hocking County, Meigs, Washington, even maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, Athens in itself is definitely identified geographically as southeastern Ohio, and probably more for the people that live here compared to the students that go to OU. Probably more represent themselves with neighboring counties such as Hocking, Vinton, Meigs, Washington. But Hocking, Vinton, and Meigs are all in District 2, which is pretty much just the very southern point of Ohio. But the northernmost point of that district is Piggaway, which is right under Franklin County, while Washington County, which is to the direct east of Athens County, is roped in with Mahoning and Stark County all the way up there towards northeastern Ohio. So I think Athens could be, if it was drawn into, if the maps were drawn in a different way, I think Athens would probably be more represented. I mean, people-wise, it would be more represented as southeastern Ohio, but with the way that this is drawn and the way that Athens is lumped into the rest of Congressional District 12, it just dilutes the blue vote that Athens has, which is the entire point of gerrymandering.
Right, which is the idea. And I guess on that same token, we've talked about Athens, Franklin, Cuyahoga. The other more left-leaning county would be Hamilton, which we have in southwest Ohio. And it's split right down the middle, just as you would expect. Half of it is with Warren County. The other half is with Butler. And some of the northern counties above Butler. But it's the same idea, right? I mean, Hamilton County is going to have a more left-leaning vote, specifically the inner city of Cincinnati. The way to dilute that vote is to cut it in half, which is what we were talking about earlier, the example of cracking. And it's important, this map that we've been talking about has been declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court of Ohio. A quote from Maureen O'Connor, who was the former Chief Justice of our Supreme Court, said, "No magician's trick can hide what the evidence overwhelmingly demonstrates. The map statistically presents such a partisan advantage that unduly favors the Republican Party." And this quote holds a lot of weight, specifically because Maureen O'Connor identifies herself as a Republican. And even given that, and in her position, she voted that this map was unconstitutional. So, Ayden, can you talk about why, despite the fact that this map has been declared unconstitutional and other maps before it have been declared unconstitutional in Ohio over and over and over again, why does it not matter?
Well, it's not that we haven't changed it. There's been separate proposals there's been separate proposals before this map that have existed that have also been deemed unconstitutional, all of which, leading up to this map we currently have, which is unconstitutional by the Ohio Supreme Court, but then was overruled by a federal court because we were coming up to an election and didn't have these congressional districts figured out.
Okay, so that's why it wasn't changed. A federal court came in and trumped our Supreme Court and said, hey, there's not enough time before the election. You're going to have to deal with what you have. Yep. And then the hands were tied. Yep. And that's why we're voting within these districts for the upcoming November election. Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, it just came down to timings, which I feel like had something to do with potentially being partially delayed on purpose, but also with trying to keep it in a fair way. I'm saying that in air quotes, a fair way, but keeping it in a way to where the Republican leadership wanted to keep that leadership, which is what, like I mentioned before, to where it's politicians are essentially choosing their own voters instead of the voters choosing the politicians to represent them.
So let's say in a hypothetical world where this issue 1 gets passed and the Constitution is amended, what do you think happens to this map? I mean, maybe not specifically talking about where certain counties would go, but maybe what do you think happens to Ohio being seen as a more right-leaning state? Do you think we go back to being considered a swing state, or do you think we literally get uprooted from our right-leaningness into a more being seen as more left-leaning?
Honestly, I think it depends on the election. I think that's what it's going to come down to. It depends on if this issue passes in November, and if it does, then that commission, goes through and exists. But it's also going to be shown in how Ohioans vote for who they want to be president. I think that's kind of going to be a big factor about it because, you have the Electoral College to where Ohio is either a red or a blue state, which is what it comes down to. But if you want to break it down into how Ohio itself and how Ohioans themselves voted on the popular vote level, then I think you could see it come down to if Ohio comes back into a swing state. But after the election in November, if it's a pretty solid red choice by Ohioans or a pretty solid blue choice by Ohioans, then I think that's where you can start gauging the change on how Ohio is going to be represented in forthcoming elections and whatnot.
Right. I'm thinking if this issue is passed and these lines are redrawn, we at least know that, for the most part, Hamilton, Franklin, and Cuyahoga probably are not going to be split the way that they are currently split. And even just given that, the Electoral College can completely shift.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you have that, but then the difficult thing about redistricting, which I will admit to as to why, Ohio and along with the other 10 other states is kind of gerrymandered in the way that they are, other than a certain political group or a certain political party wanting to hold that majority, is it comes down to that representation of people on the congressional level. So for how that would come down to representative wise in like the House or in the congressional House would be our number of representatives. So based on our population, we have the 15 representatives for the state of Ohio, and that's going to come down to when they redraw that map is to would Franklin County only have one representative because it has this many people in it, because it's that population size, which is kind of why it's also drawn in the way that it is to, these 8 counties hold this many people, which is the equivalent to what half of Franklin County holds population-wise.
Which I understand that.
Yeah, which I think is going to be a difficult task for them to figure out, but hopefully in a way that if this does pass, it's in a way that isn't so gerrymandered.
Yeah, I'll admit as well, like, drawing these lines is no easy feat. Like, it's very difficult to try to please everybody, try to make everybody feel like they're being equitably and equally represented. But what we can say, and what the Supreme Court of Ohio has said, is what we have now is unconstitutional, and that's something that we know for sure. So hopefully, if this amendment does pass, we can move in a better direction that isn't allowing, like Ayden, you said earlier, allowing politicians to choose their voters. Us as voters are the ones voting, right? Like, we should be the ones that have a say in the way these lines are drawn, not the people who are trying to get reelected. And I think that's something that people on the left and the right can agree upon.
When we've talked about gerrymandering in the past, but it's like from where I'm from in the state of Ohio, Northwest Ohio, which would specifically be right in between Allen and Hardin County, or Allen, Hardin, Hancock, in that area. Before with the maps, I didn't feel like it was a collective group of equally represented Ohioans, but even looking at this one, to where District 5 in particular has like Van Wert County, which is all the way on the west side of Ohio. It bumps up right up against the state line with Indiana, but that's also in the same congressional district as Lorain County, which is right outside of Cleveland.
They have different issues too. They're from completely different parts of the state. They're going to be facing different issues.
Someone in Claremont County is not going to agree wholeheartedly on issues with someone in Meigs County. They're just different parts of Ohio. I mean, overall, the issue 1 proposed amendment has a total of maybe more, maybe less, but has nearly 113 endorsements. Wow. From unions from across Ohio to other political activist groups and whatnot, from Equality Ohio, Honesty for Education of Ohio, Women's Voters of Ohio. Like, all of them are kind of included in that, which is nice. Yeah, so we'll look forward to seeing how this goes in November and how Ohioans vote.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Athens Happens. If you're interested in joining the New Political, come see us in the Radio Television Communications Building on Sundays from 7 to 8 p.m. Also, make sure to check out thenewpolitical.com for more podcast episodes and other content. Thank you, and until next time.